There you have it, folks. After weeks of fears of wondering what is going to happen with this whole Kadokawa Sony buyout thing, are they going to completely buy them out? Are they going to buy, over 50% of them? What is going to happen? We finally have our answer. And it's probably the best outcome, I would say. Like, if something is going to happen, this is probably the best outcome out of everything, because this pretty much mutually assures that the two companies remain what they are, and in the end, there's a benefit to them still working together. It's a business agreement more than just a complete takeover. And that's really the key thing here. This is the good thing here. This is quite the news to wake up to, by the way. I just literally woke up. But yes, Sony has released, both of them have basically released a press release. It's probably something they came to an agreement on what this release was going to be. And yes, it lays out what their business plan going forward. So let's just jump into it, and we can just kind of nail it down as we go along. But yes, Sony released this news release. The press release's website is provided for historical purposes only. Skip that. Kadokawa and Sony agree to form strategic capital and business alliance, further strengthening collaboration to maximize both companies' IP value globally. That's the good thing there. Again, this is sort of when we were first talking about this, I did see a benefit to it. I didn't see it completely as doom and gloom. There was a benefit to it. This idea that yes, whatever Kadokawa owns, Sony can take and really make grow. But the fear there is that only Sony can. That was my fear. Tokyo, Japan, Kadokawa Corporation, Kadokawa, and Sony Group Corporation, Sony, today signed a strategic capital and business alliance agreement, agreeing to conduct a third-party allotment by Kadokawa to Sony on January 7th of 2025, with Sony acquiring 12 million shares of Kadokawa, approximately 50 billion yen. That's in the hundreds of millions area. With the acquisition of the new shares, Sony will become Kadokawa's largest shareholder, holding approximately 10% of its shares, including the shares Sony previously acquired in February of 2027. Now, this is an important thing to note here because, yes, when I first seen the breakdown, which you can actually check on the Kadokawa breakdown here, sorry for the the flashbang here, you could actually notice in their breakdown here, they're not actually the largest. Sony's right here after the allotment right here. They're only 9.68%. But if you look up here, we have Master Trust Bank of Japan has 9.7 and Korea Security Depository has 10%. Though, if you do look down further in the actual release from Kadokawa, they do explain that this is, that's not really the case here. These are trust accounts and whatnot. Thus, they are not really technically a single entity owning that much. It's technically like a grouping of people. So it's not necessarily that these groups have that. Now, there's a lot of money in there, and maybe them as a group could say something, but Kadokawa themselves are saying no. They don't have say over things because, well, they have say, they just don't have 10% say. So yes, this does make Sony have the largest amount here. Kadokawa and Sony historically have collaborated on various projects, and through the Capital and Business Alliance, intend to further strengthen our collaboration to maximize both companies' IP value globally and facilitate wider and deeper collaboration, such as potential joint investments in the content field, joint discovery of new creators, joint promotion of further media mixes of both companies' IPs. Good stuff here. Again, this is sort of the positive of this whole situation, is that with this, it means that Sony is more invested in Kadokawa. I think there's a two-sided thing here that people do kind of miss sometimes is, well, I think some people were pointing it out, that Kadokawa themselves could see that they need this. They need help. They might see some losses or something that's happening, and having Sony as sort of there to assist them, they can work together. That's what kind of comes from a lot of these business partners is that, again, with them both being invested into each other, they see a mutual benefit to each other's success. And that's the great thing about something like this versus a full-out buyout. Because if Sony were to buy out Kadokawa completely, then they could start trimming off what they don't want. Well, we wanted all this stuff right here, and you made us have to buy all of this, so now that we own you, let's just get rid of all this and we'll focus on the thing that we wanted originally that we're going to make a lot of money from. We're just buying this one product and everything else isn't necessary. Yes, you can say like Elden Ring over here that everybody's still kind of stuck on with Kadokawa and this buyout is Elden Ring over here. Yes, we don't need that because it doesn't really make much money in the grand scheme of things. We'll just cut that out. We'll sell that studio off to somebody else. I'm just joking. It's important. Not important to the grand scale of things. They can focus on what they want. Whereas right here, Kadokawa still exists. So Kadokawa will mutually think, okay, well, I want this to succeed, and I'll give that to you. We'll work together on making that success, and we'll both make money from it. But, and this is the most important thing, in the end, Kadokawa can still go to somebody else and say, hey, let's work with you. That's the key thing here. In the end, them only buying up to 10% shares means that Kadokawa, yes, will be talking to Sony very, very closely, but they still can say, I can talk to somebody else without asking Sony permission. That's the key thing there. That's the thing that I was afraid of in the end if this buyout happened, is if anybody else knocked on Kadokawa's door, they didn't have to check with Sony first. Hey, Sony, somebody else wants this property and make an anime for it. No, we want that. Or, hey, Sony, somebody else wants this property to make an anime out of it. Yeah, we're not doing anything with it, but we don't want nobody else to touch it. This is good. This is good. In the future, the two companies plan to discuss specific initiatives for collaboration, such as initiatives to adapt Kadokawa's IP into live-action films. Ugh. Why? Don't tell me you bought up to 10% shares just to make live actions that nobody wants. And TV dramas globally. Co-produce anime works. This is obviously a given right here. Again, I think this is like a big portion of this whole situation, is to have those IPs for anime works. Expand global distribution. I mean, it could technically be that Sony somewhere has plans to grow the live action aspects of a lot of the properties. I mean, we do see a lot of companies dabbling in live actions, adaptations of anime and whatnot, but maybe they're planning on making it bigger. I guess it could also go into the realms of wanting to do live actions out of Hollywood, which, yes, everybody listening to this is probably just immediately groaned right there. But just, I can see them trying to make it a thing. One Piece seemed like it was very successful, and they could probably have other properties, Sword Art Online, that they want to do with that with. I know there was a group that was talking about doing a Sword Art Online for the longest time, but they could possibly finally do that. This is all an attempt to make a massive IP, a long-running live-action Sword Art Online. I could totally see it happening if that other project didn't get off the ground. Expand global distribution of Kadokawa's anime works through the Sony Group. And again, I see that happening. And this could actually be a good thing as well. If people have a lot of issues with certain properties disappearing from Crunchyroll, or disappearing from High Dive, or disappearing from Amazon Prime or Netflix, these anime titles where they're on there for a long time, and then you finally go back to watch them and it's gone. The page cannot be found or no longer available. It's because those licenses expire at some point. This could be a move to sort of bring in those titles onto Crunchyroll that have possibly not been licensed for a long time and sustain them there for a longer period of time. That's a good thing as well. Further expanding publishing of Kadokawa games. Interesting. I'm not sure what that would include. Okay, so that does include Elden Ring and Armored Core. Okay. It didn't say specifically the studio or anything, so I wasn't sure. And again, that doesn't mean they own Elden Ring. Just make that perfectly clear. That doesn't mean they own Elden Ring. It just means that they're going to be further expanding that publishing. And develop human resources to promote and expand virtual production. Okay. Comment from the CEO of Kadokawa Corporation. We are very pleased to conclude this capital and business alliance agreement with Sony. This alliance is expected to not only further strengthen our IP creation capabilities, but also increase our IP media mix options with Sony's support for global expansion, allowing us to deliver our IP to more users around the world. We are confident that this will greatly contribute to maximizing the value of our IP and increase the corporate value in the mid to long term. We intend to do our utmost to ensure that our collaborative efforts with Sony produce great results in our global market. Again, this is where I think in the end, Kadokawa won. This is really where it's kind of cementing in my brain. This is a thought process I had that's cementing in my brain as I read this. This feels like a Kadokawa win in the end. Because in the end, what it is that Kadokawa is very domestic with it. Like, they're very much so in Japan. Yes, they do have a lot of things they're branching out with, but they don't really have a strong avenue to do that. Sony is giving them that strong avenue to do that. They're giving them a distribution method that they have easily available to them. And in the end, what it does is it helps Kadokawa themselves grow and expand out of Japan. Not they're going out of Japan, it's they're expanding out of Japan. They're getting those channels to get that out there. And in the end, what that does, it brings in more money. Sony is basically giving them the avenue to just say, ship this and bring in more money. It's actually a very huge thing for Kadokawa themselves. Then we have the president of Sony Group Corporation. Through this capital and business alliance, we will become the largest shareholder of Kadokawa, which consistently creates a wide variety of IPs, including publications and books, such as light novels and comics, as well as games and anime. By combining Kadokawa's extensive IP and IP create, I feel so validated. I'm sorry, I feel so validated. After like weeks of people saying, no, it's Elden Ring. No, it's got to be about Elden Ring. It's about to be the gaming stuff. It's about the IPs. That's what I said before, and I'll say it again over and over again. It's about the IPs. They wanted Kadokawa's IPs. And let's face it, sort of joking earlier, but it was true. I think Kadokawa is getting the most benefit out of this whole situation. This agreement is to the benefit of Kadokawa. Sony is still getting something really good here. They are getting this access to something, probably first dibs at any IPs that come out of there. They're getting access to all this stuff that they really do want. And yes, technically publication as well. But again, I think in the end, it's really just to get that catalog. They want that catalog so bad. And yes, in the end, they're going to get a lot of other benefits as well, like I mentioned earlier, with the whole aspect of accessing maybe older anime titles that are just kind of in vaults that aren't really being touched. If they can throw this at them and they get access to this massive catalog, they don't have to keep licensing things over and over again. That's a huge win for them. By combining Kadokawa's extensive IP and IP creation ecosystem with the strengths of Sony, which has promoted the global expansion and wide range of entertainment, including anime and games, we plan to work closely together to realize Kadokawa's global media mix strategy aimed at maximizing the value of its IPs and Sony's long-term vision, creative entertainment vision. That's pretty much it. Yeah, again, I think this makes sense because with Sony, it gives Kadokawa the avenue to do that. If this whole like global mixed media concept here, where it's not just if you have what I'm assuming this whole media mix thing is, because it makes sense. If you have a property, so somebody comes to Kadokawa and says, I have this great idea for a novel. And then Kadokawa goes, wow, that's a really good story. Let's publish it. So they turn it into a book and they start selling it in stores. That's it. Don't stop there. Don't stop there. Let's make an anime out of it. Let's make a manga out of it. Let's make a live action out of it. Let's make all these, let's make a video game out of it. That's the concept there of mixed media projects. If you ever see like properties of mixed media, that's typically what it means. They're going to put it in as many things as possible. That's Kadokawa's goal there. But again, they don't have enough avenue and strength and money to throw it in all this kind of stuff all the time. Sony can give them that avenue to do that. They go, okay, well, why haven't you made a live action of this? This would probably be a really good live action. Why haven't you made a live action of Sword Art Online? That would be a really good project to do a live action. Not that I want it, by the way. I don't want live actions of this stuff. It just doesn't, it never works. It rarely ever works. Sony can come up and say, why haven't you done that? And Kadokawa goes, this is really expensive, dude. And then Sony goes, we'll handle it. We'll handle it. Because again, it's still their property. It's still Kadokawa's property. But what happens in that moment is that Sony goes, we'll do it because we get 10% of whatever you make. So it's a good thing if it's successful. Again, this is probably the best outcome because in the end, they remain their own entities, while at the same time, there's a mutual beneficial aspect to them being successful. They want Kadokawa to be successful because they get 10% of it. And Kadokawa wants Sony to be successful because they get a percentage too. Because I think they also mentioned the fact that Kadokawa is buying a percentage of them as well. Yeah, Kadokawa owns 129,000 shares of Sony, which I don't think is much, but it's still an amount. But still, even putting aside the shares, it's still mutually beneficial to Kadokawa because what happens to their IP? It gains value. It gains value. And so anything else it does that IP, let's again give the example Sword Art Online. Let's say if Sony made a live action of Sword Art Online and it becomes extremely successful, Kadokawa still owns Sword Art. So in the end, they can go, well, let's make another manga. And guess what? It has so much more recognition now, especially globally, that they can then sell more of the manga. They can sell more figurines. They can sell more anime. Let's make another anime. Let's reboot the whole thing. They can keep selling more things as Sony grows the property with just this one project. Mutually beneficial in the end. I like that. Again, not a full buyout. It's only 10% shares. This is not a majority ownership. This doesn't mean that Sony can control things. I think that's something that people are going to run with to fearmonger quite a bit. So it's probably best to kind of head that off now. It's still going to happen, let's be honest. But let's be perfectly clear. owning 10% is not an ownership of the company. Again, it's not 50.1%. It's 10%. Now, yes, using their site here because I want to flashbang you guys again. Yes, that does mean they own more than all of these other companies, and thus you can think that they can outspeak all these people. That's not the case. If you have Sony Group Corporation, they speak up and they say, I don't like this, we're not doing it. And they're like, wait, but we really want to do this project. No, you give it to us or nobody can have it. If we don't get if we don't get Sword Art Online to do the live action, nobody gets it. Yes, technically, if State Street Bank speaks up, and it's another trust company, if Bandai Namco Holdings speaks up and says, but no, we wanted it, and Sony says, but we own 10%, so you can't say anything. You only own 2%. What happens is, yes, Sony can talk them down, but what happens in a situation like this is where if all these people speak up and say, no, Sony, you're not getting it, Sony has to back down. The individuals will have problems speaking up against Sony, but together they have an equal voice. And again, even still, at 10%, it's not like they control things. In the end, it needs the agreement of other people in order to do things. That's why, again, this is actually a good thing. So, that's the news. Crazy thing again to wake up to. And again, like I said before, I think this is probably, if something were going to happen, this is probably the best outcome. Is the idea that they don't necessarily control anything. They don't take control completely. They don't just own Kadokawa and just, again, start dissecting things and just tossing things out of Kadokawa. And again, my biggest fear, the idea of anybody wanting to work with properties of Kadokawa, we're going to get snuffed out. I talked about this in great length on our podcast discussion about this whole situation a couple weeks ago. But I had this massive fear of this idea of a lot of outside companies and publishers and whatnot that were going to essentially die away because Sony owns a massive pool of properties that people were wanting to get from. You had all these different production committees and whatnot that were wanting to get properties from Kadokawa, and Sony, at that point, owning it, would essentially be able to snuff all of them out. And yes, maybe a lot of studios that would normally get properties from Kadokawa to produce, we're no longer going to have those because it was going to be pretty much everything from Kadokawa was going to funnel through Sony Studios. Now, again, they could have used those outside studios, but there'd be a greater benefit to them to use their own studios. So you'd see a lot of studios dying away, a lot of producers pretty much finding other businesses. A lot of stuff would start dying away. It was going to really, I would argue, really suffocate a massive majority of the anime industry. But with this, again, it's almost like nothing changes. In the end with this, it's just Kadokawa and Sony coming to a partnership. And they're probably going to grow together because of it. Rather than snuff everybody else out, they're just going to strengthen themselves while at the same time still playing ball with everybody else. That's the key thing there. Still playing ball with other people. Anyhow, let me know what you guys think of in the comments down below. I think it's a good move, but we'll see in the future. I don't know. Maybe in 2 weeks we'll find out that Sony and Kadokawa come to the agreement of just do a full buyout. Like in the end, Kadokawa keeps growing to the point where Sony's like, now we want to buy you. We've grown you. Now it's time to buy you. And that could technically be somewhere in some hidden secret conversation in the back rooms. The Kadokawa, you grow enough. If we can get you built up to a certain point, you allow us to buy you out completely. That could be conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, y'all take care.